Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy podcast. Each week, we expose the faulty foundational mindsets of the past and rebuild a newer, stronger foundation essential in creating your meaningful legacy. We've got a lot of work to do, so let's get started. As much as you like this podcast, I'm certain that you're going to love the book that I just released on Amazon, Fuel Your Legacy, The 9 Pillars to Build a Meaningful Legacy. I wrote this to share with you the experiences that I had while I was identifying my identity, how I began to create my meaningful legacy, and how you can create yours. You're going to find this book on Kindle, Amazon, and as always on my website, samknickerbocker.com. Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy show, and today we have, honestly, a guest that I looked forward to talking to when the company reached out and said, hey, do you want to have Jonathan on? It's like, absolutely. We need more of these conversations happening. Jonathan Baktari, he has an incredible experience and background from every area of the health insurance or health field, not even just health insurance, but from insurance company, medical director positions at hospitals, building companies in the tech space, of really optimizing, helping you become the best, healthiest person that you can be. And he's kind of become a COVID expert, right? And you say that with a grin because everybody's COVID expert, right? No, some people actually are COVID experts. Some people actually understand both from the virology aspect of what's going on with the actual thing, what's happening with the vaccines. He's super knowledgeable about the vaccines and where that moves forward and how does that implement the rest of our lives. More importantly, how do we protect ourselves from how do we get healthy so that even if these things do happen, because as much as we wish we could say this, COVID's not going to be the last virus to encroach on our personal health. You know, it definitely wasn't the first one. And your body's amazing if you allow it to be amazing and prepare itself for no matter what comes next. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm super, super excited. And just I want to get as much knowledge here for you guys as we can get. So let's jump in. Jonathan, go ahead and share with us your backstory. How did you end up in the healthcare field? And how did you stop around technology? I know a lot of people, they're either like tech people or they're management or they're communicators. Sometimes they're a mixture, but what's your backstory? Where'd you grow up? How did you become passionate about helping people optimize their health?
Yeah, well, thanks for asking me that. My original thing, of course, like many people, was I wanted to be a doctor. You know, my dad was a doctor, and Sam, and I just thought, it was an amazing opportunity to, help people and more like a calling, as it were. And then went to medical school, residency, fellowship, and then subsequently went to the clinical medicine, which is what, the vast majority of people do who, go to medical school. They just, most of them develop a clinical career, go into clinical practice and see patients. At some point, once I had been doing that for a little bit, I wanted to see if there were other ways that you can make an impact on healthcare. So initially I started, joining a lot of committees and organizations that did more than just clinical work. And then subsequently got into administrative medicine. I was, chief of internal medicine for one of the hospitals I was at, and then eventually became medical director at Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield for the state of Nevada, and then subsequently another insurance company, and then was asked to be medical director for several hospitals. And then in the meantime, I was also doing some teaching at medical schools. So I was clinical faculty over the years at 3 medical schools. So got the sort of teaching background, the clinical background, the sort of hospital administrative background, and the insurance administrative background. And it was really eye-opening to kind of see healthcare from all 4 pillars, again, clinical, teaching, hospital, insurance. And when you see it from all sides and you see how all 4 view everything, you see obviously there's a lot of commonality, but you see different priorities. And then when you look at some of the friction in healthcare, some of the obstacles that patients have and providers have you realize it's often because of competing priorities that different players have. And everyone's sort of looking at it from their perspective, but there isn't one common perspective, as it were, because while there's overlap, there's areas that different players in healthcare play, and I haven't even thrown in the pharmaceutical companies, and they're of course they want I'm sure they want people to get better with their medications, what have you, but obviously they also have priorities that might be slightly different. So I think it became so obvious, when you have the satellite perspective. So when we sort of started E7 Health, wow, it's been now over 10 years ago, 12 years ago, we kind of looked at it and said, hey, well, where is all of this friction, and, where are the parts in healthcare that the interests do not overlap and compete and go in different direction, and what can we do as an organization to overcome that and just have the main focus be patient care, quality care, reduce friction for the patients, remove obstacles, and provide a different, I'm going to use a tech term, but a different user experience in healthcare. I mean, you see it all the time in technology. We got to improve user experience. And we think if you improve user experience, more people are more likely to use the product or service more frequently. When someone, I think everyone dreads, these days calling an airline because they know they're going to be put on hold for an hour or two, or they dread calling the cable company. And so we try to minimize those things as much as we can. We don't want to have those interactions. If you're going to call an airline these days, what you're headed for. And, if there's any way you can avoid that interaction, or you need to change your cable service or your cell phone service, you try to avoid that like the plague. And that's because the user experience has changed in a way that you don't like it. And we didn't want healthcare to be like that. We didn't want healthcare. I know a lot of people call their doctor's office and they're like, press 1 if you like to book an appointment, press 2 this, and then once you do that, they tell you, okay, well, press 1 if you need this, press, and then you go through a series of prompts, and at the end they say, oh, okay, leave a message, we'll call you back in 24 hours, even after all that. So that's not a good experience, and that's not going to make you want to call back. And that's just one little sliver of the bad user experience that some people get. And so we wanted to see if we could change all that. And we wanted to see if we could leverage technology to change all that, meaning have our technology be focused on quality, improving quality so patients really get amazing, amazing care, but also, make sure that it's painless, frictionless, easy to access, easy to get. And we've done a lot of things, both in terms of our culture as well as our technology to achieve that.
That's incredible. I'm excited to dig in here. I have my own perspective, right, based on how I was raised, and I'm excited just to have this conversation. Hopefully from a place of respect. I respect everybody's perspective, so hopefully that's how everything comes across. But before that, what about like growing up and seeing your dad be a doctor? Why was it so attractive to you? I know some people, and I've talked to doctors, and many doctors, unless they're like passionate about the actual practice of saving people, a lot of doctors are like, man, there's a lot easier ways to make money, and it's really stressful. So. And you don't have a lot of time. Like some doctors that don't end up with time freedom, they end up being owned by a company. There's always battling insurance. Like there's all these downsides. And so I've talked, not saying that they should overshadow the good sides. Some doctors, they do it because they love it. And I've also had other doctors tell me, if I could do it over again, I would get out. But I'm so far in at this point, they're 25 years into their career. So it's like, I'm not just going to bag it now. But what you got to grow up and see your father be a doctor and see what I assume the pros and cons on the family life of what that entailed. What about that lifestyle was attractive to you?
Well, it's funny because I have my own podcast, Baktari MD, and I did a video on this. I mean, the whole topic you just brought up, literally word for word. Why, when you're choosing medicine, what you're in for and how it's probably different than what you think. You got to remember, something interesting. I hope you don't mind if I digress a little bit, but, most people make the decision to become a doctor. Take a guess at what age do you really have to decide if you want to go into medical school? And I'll just tell you, I mean, most people decide if they want to go into medicine at age 18.
That late. I would have guessed sooner. I would have guessed like 8 to 10, maybe 12 years old. They start idolizing it, and that's what they decide.
Well, maybe it's semantics. I'm talking about where you actually have to do things different to get into medical school.
Okay, cool.
I mean, when you're 18 years old, you can say you want or don't want, but you don't have to perform. Okay. But at age 18, you got to start getting straight A's so you can apply to medical school. So that decision that you will not only to make it, but then have to act out on it. Let's say you want to start a podcast. Well, you're going to have to buy a microphone, right? And that act of buying a microphone is like your first step. It's not just thinking about starting a podcast. You're doing something. So the point in life where you actually have to do something to act on your desire is at 18. 18-year-olds have to decide, for the most part, there's exceptions, that I want to go into medical school, because right then you have to start taking pre-med courses. You have to start getting great grades. You have to, volunteer, maybe do extracurricular stuff. So med schools will be impressed with you. It's very competitive. And so the question really is, do you really want 18-year-olds to be making decisions about what they're going to be doing at 30 or 40? Go back to when you were 18. And were you like in the optimal state of mind to decide what you want to be doing at your current age? But that's what happens in medicine, okay? Because the train takes off at 18, and it's an express train that doesn't stop till you're, 65 or something. There's no stops in between. So sort of you get on the train at 18 and you get off at 65. And, there's no, I mean, yes, there are people who get off the train, but those are the exceptions. And so for most people, you make a decision at 18 and you live with it till you retire. I don't think there are other fields similar to that, but by and large, people change fields, change careers, but doctors and some other professions invest so much time. In my case, 4 years of college, 4 years of med school, 3 years of residency, 3 years of fellowship, that's a big investment. So it's hard to get off the train because you've committed yourself. It's sort of like going to the grocery store and filling your cart up to the brim and then walking to the checkout line saying, oh, there's a long wait, let me just leave. No, you just spent an hour filling up. You're not going to leave at that point. Versus if you just had one thing in your arm and you get to the cashier and there's a big line, you're like, okay, one thing. No, I didn't really invest that much. I'll come back. So it's sort of that. So just hitting on what you're saying, and I don't want to digress too much. I think most people decide, about medical school at age 18, and you're invincible at 18. Someone says you want to go hang gliding. You're like, yeah, sure. What the heck? Your ability to size up risk and what you really want, and your ability to think you can handle things. So I think part of that is that, but then part of people just size up the whole thing. So I'm so committed to making people better and helping people that I'm prepared to live with the stress and all the things you said. So I think it could be both ways, but hopefully the majority of people understand the risk and say, you know what? It just means that much to me to be able to make a difference in people's lives. And I think that's how I felt. Even when you size up the risk, it was just like, what an honor, what a calling it is, to be able to have this very intimate relationship with people. A new patient will walk into your office, right? And within 2 minutes of you starting to see them, will tell you the most intimate things about their lives. That's a true honor. You're not going to do that with many other professions. And you have to kind of look at that and say, wow, what an honor it is that, almost complete strangers will walk into my office and tell me about issues that they're having and struggles they're having that they wouldn't share with very many others. So if you view it like that, like who else could be in this position where you could have this kind of, and then use that information to help them. If you've been trained in that field or have something to offer, you can make an immediate impact potentially.
Sure. So, hey, I love that. Thank you for answering that, because that's something that I always wonder. Because I know of me at 18, I thought I was going to go to school to be a neuropsychologist. Like that was what I was doing. And at the same time, I had made that decision that I was going to go do that. I'm so grateful for some really great college professors who dissuaded me, or not necessarily dissuaded, but they brought into perspective what I was really in for if I wanted it, right? And I think that's what's important. But at the same time, I was doing door-to-door sales, and I was looking at the highest paid people in my career field were at the time somewhere between, the highest paid people were probably around $400,000 and $500,000 a year. The average income for the position I wanted was right around $150,000 to $250,000. And that was like if you worked for an institution at a college and you were constantly doing research and, all of that. And I was like, that's not the lifestyle I want. And at the same time, I was earning over $100,000 a year, knocking doors in 3 months. And so I was like,
wow,
I don't think I could justify spending 13 years or more, when you factor in all the education, residency, everything, to end up making such a little amount of money in compared to what I was already making at 18. So like that's where, I'm not saying at all that $200,000 or $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 is a little amount of money for most people. But if you can make that in 3 months knocking doors, then it brings things into perspective a little bit differently. And I don't think I have 13 years of my life to dedicate to that lifestyle anymore.
Right.
And not because I wasn't passionate about helping people, but I still am passionate about helping people. But I found a different avenue that was a lower barrier of entry and provided ultimately more income to accomplish what I believe will ultimately accomplish the same thing, which is relieve anxiety, stress, domestic violence, divorce, all the social issues that I care most about. So it's just interesting there. Now it's going, because you went to school. I grew up homeschooled, in the 7th of 11 kids, and my parents were like naturopathic, got all your teas and potions in mason jars, and that's I don't know how else to describe it, but that's how it was. Okay, so I grew up with an inherent distrust of the medical industry. And sometimes it kicks me in the butt, and I think, man, I wish I didn't have this distrust built in. That being said, again, so I'm approaching this from my perspective, and what my lens is that I see it through is that a lot of people go in with a sincere desire to help people, and because of my programming, which is not true, I'm not claiming this as fact by any stretch of the imagination. So anybody listening, don't say that Sam said this. This is Sam's opinion, okay? My opinion is a lot of the healthcare industry is funded, and the education is funded by big pharma. Mm-hmm. And as a result, more often than not, medical professionals are taught more of how to just sustain life and relieve pain, rather than really optimize health and create health. They're like, hey, we have this Band-Aid, this drug, and they're more taught about pharmaceuticals and how to manage illness rather than how to actually create health. And so I'm just curious if you've seen all sides of it. You've seen the insurance side, and you talked about the competing priorities. I understand there's competing priorities in everything in life. This isn't just a healthcare problem. You've got a family. If you've got a spouse, your spouse has priority. Your children have priorities. You've got priorities. Everywhere in life, we have to manage priorities. We can't just say, well, it's just in this industry. But what is the balance? Like when you think about you obviously went through years of performing in these different roles, and ultimately decided to look at where the gaps are and go create something that was useful in a user experience. So there's obviously gaps that you already recognize with the competing priorities. how do you think that impacts the actual care of our society? Because what I see is a lot of people living longer with worse health for the most part. So it's like, are we just trying to sustain life? And is that the main focus of the medical profession now? Or whose priority is it that's the focus? When somebody goes in thinking, I'm going to go have this noble desire to help people, and then they get turned into, I'm just going to prescribe something and get you out the door because it's more of a factory. And this is all my perspective. I know it sounds like just a bunch of paint up on a wall. I'm just curious, how does that all play in? And I'll share some experiences of where I should have trusted the medical profession sooner and I didn't. But I'm just curious your thoughts there.
Wow, there's a lot to unpack there. Okay.
It is, I know.
So, okay, so I get this all the time, and it's a very, I get the from family members and cocktail parties, and people hit me up and say, I just, going to this clinic, or I just met this naturopath who's doing this and that, and I get all that. So let me just unwind some of it. First of all, yes, I totally agree. Doctors as a general, are very focused on just curing things and treating things, not preventing things. And I get that.
But when you say, let me stop you there. When you say cure, maybe my definition of cure is different.
Or treat. I said cure
okay,
or treat.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't matter. Some things are curable. You have an ulcer, we could probably cure it. I mean, we can give you medicines and the ulcer will go away. If you consider that a cure, it's a cure.
Okay.
If not, that's not a cure. Or treat, if you're having migraines, whatever. So here's the deal. Doctors, yes, should they be more focused on preventive health and wellness, which is more what we do? Yes, of course. And of course, they also do treat and cure. But here's what I have to say. When it comes to the treat and cure side, we have come a long way in the last 50 years. And if you do have something, if you do, tear up your ACL now versus 100 years ago or 50 years ago, I mean, you are in much better shape. If you're having constant migraines, or if you're suffering from Crohn's disease, inflammatory bowel disease, or have atrial fibrillation, we do have better therapy. I think what you're saying, though, is there's not enough focus on preventing those things, if I'm putting words in your mouth. And I think that is true. I think there is a lot of room for physicians, especially primary care doctors, to work on wellness and prevention rather than wait for you to get it and then start treating it. Yeah. I don't know if that's where you were going.
So let me just hop in to clarify, because I think that for intellectual honesty here, it needs to be clarified. We're using the word doctor, and that is like the broadest stroke word you can use in the medical profession. So I don't want to be throwing, I think every profession's different, right? So a surgeon is probably going to have a different objective and goal, because they're not, like, their goal is to take out something or repair something. And and so that probably ultimately falls into a different category than somebody who is it. I mean, a surgeon's probably not the one prescribing medication ultimately. Maybe they are. I don't know enough about the medical profession, but there's different roles. Okay, so using the word doctor, I think, is probably unfair, because then there's a lot of people who are like, well, I'm a doctor and I don't do that. I get it. So just to be clear there, I would say, and I guess the point that I'm getting at, and I think we're driving there, which is what I want to actually talk about, is that the idea of, because this is something that happens everywhere in life. I'm using the medical profession, because you're in the medical profession, as the narrative that we're talking about. And one of the books you said you recommend is Pitch Anything. My favorite book. I just reread it again just recently, because I think it's crucial to understand what is the top, like, maintain the conversation in the conversation. So a lot of times we're looking at the symptoms, and we're trying to help the symptoms go away. So when you say, oh, you have an ulcer, yeah, we can get the ulcer to go away. Okay, you got rid of that symptom. The reason there was an ulcer there is a real issue. And so that's what I'm like, why are we not going that next step in the medical profession as a general rule to really identify, hone in, and say, oh, look, you got an ulcer. why did you get an ulcer? The body doesn't just, in a perfect state, I don't think the body's just creating ulcers. The body's creating an ulcer as a response to some stimuli. What was that stimuli that created the body's need for an ulcer? And that's where I don't feel like that's getting necessarily discussed, not just in the medical profession, but anywhere. If you got a divorce, the problem wasn't the divorce, guys. The problem was what was wrong with the relationship. And probably it's not the relationship. What was wrong with you that caused you to be the way you are? So does that make sense?
Yeah, but I'm going to give you a little blowback on that. And like if you go in for an ulcer, I'm not a GI doctor, but they will treat it. But then they will go into these. You need to change your diet and what have you. Your stress. I think very few people have gone in for an ulcer and been diagnosed and just been given medicine and see you later. I'm not sure. And sometimes like patients would come back that I've referred out, we're picking ulcers, but it could be a kidney stone, right?
Sure.
And I say, well, so you want to see the GI guy? Yeah, he started on medicine. Well, did he say anything else? He goes, no, he didn't. He didn't say anything else. He just said, take this medicine. It's so funny because a few times I've asked for those medical records, and the medical records I get from the GI doctor went in excruciating detail about the diet and this and that. And so I want to defend doctors or the medical a little bit, because very few doctors will just come in and give you medication, not give you the whole picture. And especially these days, we have concierge doctors where you can spend an hour with, or even just in general, there's a whole push within healthcare is prevention. You go in for a kidney stone, they're going to take the kidney. If you can get the kidney stone, they're going to analyze it, see if it's mainly calcium or oxalate, and they're going to tell you what kind of diet to go on, and what drink a lot of fluids to prevent. For this idea that doctors just give you a medication and don't put you on a diet, tell you what to do, how to avoid the next one, it's a little unfair, because if you actually go in for something, you will see that for the most part, often there's a big push in helping you understand it and preventing it. And I'll tell you why that really exists, because think about, for example, what's happened in healthcare in the last 40 years. We've gone from almost 100% fee for service to a vast majority of now being HMOs and PPOs. HMOs and more managed care. One of the ways managed care has a lot of issues that are bad, but one of the good side of it is they don't want you to have this problem because it costs them money. They're at risk for you getting sick again. If you get sick again and get hospitalized again, they lose money. So there's a strong incentive for them to make sure you never have another kidney stone. And they have nurses calling you, and they have, follow up. And there's this whole parade of preventing people from, getting sick again and what have you. So, and maybe, that's one of the positive side effects of managed care, which is there's now a financial incentive if you belong to an HMO or even Medicare Advantage. If you're in the Medicare range, those Medicare Advantage companies are going to hound you like a dog to make sure you don't get sick again, because they're at risk. Medicare gives them one lump sum. If you get in the hospital 1,000 times or once, they get the same amount of money. They're highly incentivized to keep you healthy. So I think, traditionally 50 years ago, when every doctor was fee for service, you came in, they took care of you, they got paid, and that was it. You got sick again, they got paid. You got sick again, they got paid. I think that dynamic is changing. Also within hospitals, hospitals are now part of plans and what have you. Everyone's really getting incentivized to keep you healthy. And then the other part I want to go is just the whole field that's kind of grown up to support this, which is, all of the naturopathic and wellness and yoga and, Fitbit and this and that, all of this stuff that's been meant to, whether it's boot camps opening up every corner, and there's a whole industry now to keep you well. And now I think the real issue from my perspective is, why haven't we made a dent in it? And part of it is probably because, this country has so much abundance that, it's easy to gain weight. It's easy. what have you, and be unhealthy if you want to be, to drink and what have you. But on balance, though, I've seen in my career a massive shift towards keeping people healthy. Just sign up for an HMO and go in for, like an ulcer and see what kind of follow-up they give you, because they don't want you to come back. And I hate to say it, I mean, it's partly driven by financial, but look, even friends of mine, doctors don't want you to come back. They don't want you to get sick again.
Right.
And we give out that information and we press and push. Does everyone listen? No. Could we be doing more? Of course. But I think from where I sit, from seeing my colleagues and friends and other doctors and how they interact, they're strongly incentivized. I had a friend of mine, go to see an orthopedist just a few weeks ago who had a bad knee, and he's a little older. And the orthopedist said, "Listen, you know what? We could do surgery, but honestly, at your age, whatever, let's just give you, steroid injection, physical therapy." Not everyone gets rushed into surgery. There are people who are really trying to do conservative management, even though the surgeon would get paid to do the surgery. I think most surgeons do the right thing. Are there excesses? Are there exceptions? Yes.
In every industry, there's going to be the bad apple. So I'm not, and that's why I appreciate you sharing that perspective. Right. Part of this is like playing the antagonist. Both of us are playing the antagonist for purpose of the conversation, because I think it's important. We got to be clear about it. So what's unique about your response and what I like about it is it leads us to another question, which is another book that you mentioned, but and some of your expertise is building the right tribe and building the right culture, where it sounds like what you're saying is the medical profession, they're changing their incentive structure. Supposedly, I'm going to push back on that in a second, but they're changing their incentive structure and to actually keep people healthy, which has its benefits if it's the one benefit of all the other crap that's there. But then the culture has been conditioned to not care. So then we go in and a doctor says, "Hey, this is all the stuff that needs to happen," and we don't really care because we're just looking for a quick fix. So maybe
some people no. I mean, some people listen and some people follow through, and some people. I mean, but there are subsets of patients and people who, will continue to not exercise, and they're going to continue to eat and gain weight and smoke and drink excessively, whatever. I mean, you can't stop people from doing it. I think the question is, are we doing a good enough job to get the message out? And hopefully we are.
Okay. And so this is where I'm going to push back just a little on the recommendation side again. And this is from my super skeptical skepticism of doctors' industries. And it's not an attack. It's really interesting because for me, again, I go through where did these people get educated on what to recommend? Right. And so my opinion is most doctors are educated through medical school. And somebody funded those schools. Somebody's name is on the building. Okay. Somebody's paying for that education. And when they're paying for that education, they're paying for their philosophies to be taught to those people. That's my belief. Okay. I'm not saying it's true. This is like the weird conspiracy theory belief. Okay. And I'm okay with bringing them up. I'm not married to any belief. I just like more information. So, but I believe that humans, by and large, are good. I don't actually believe that the majority of people are out there trying to cause harm. I think that more likely than not, people were educated a certain way, and they're propagating the information that they believe is true because that's what they were taught to be true. And that information may or may not be true, right? And then if you go back in history and look at the history of why certain things are labeled bad in our society and why certain things are labeled good in our society, then we deal with, it really was financial structures. Cigarettes, they were like glorified for many years in our country. And then the incentive structure changed, and then they were like vilified, right? So it went from glorified to vilified. Sugar, glorified, vilified. Milk, glorified, vilified. Different fats. So it's like now we're dealing with like this cycle of who's funding the research. I mean, you got to go all the way back. If you've been a doctor, I've studied neuropsychology, right? There's a level of who's funding the research, and once you learn how to read research, you can see that okay, there's lots of ways to manipulate research, and then the research is what's educating these people. So that's like my only. For me, it's like okay, I've got to take everything with a grain of salt because who's really funding the research? That became a big problem with the most current COVID vaccine of like the incentive structures just seemed really, for half the country, I don't know if it's half the country, they seemed a little off, or the timing seemed a little bit off and strange. Now we've got lawsuits where they're exempt from, and it's like, it's weird. And the whole thing came about a weird way. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong because maybe we did save millions more people than we would have without it. I don't know. So it's an interesting thing.
Maybe an anecdote that happened to me will help you or the listeners. I remember when I was 18 years old or 19 or 20 something, I was volunteering, I think it's an orderly in the hospital, like when I was in college, just to get some exposure. And I don't want to date myself, but at that time on the news, I think Steve McQueen, had cancer or something. He was an actor, and he was. There was this drug that was holistic that was supposed to cure cancer. It was called Laetrile, and they got it from an apricot seed, an extract from, and there was a whole thing on the news that the medical industry was, not wanting to use it because the pharmaceutical industry, wasn't patent and they wouldn't make any money. And I think Steve McQueen had to go to Mexico to some clinic to get it because the big bad medical establishment was withholding it because they couldn't make money on it. And they didn't want to cure cancer because it was a money maker. And so it's just, of course, I just saw this on the news. And the next day I just happened to run into a cancer doctor in the hospital. Right. And, I'm thinking I'm so smart because I saw this thing on the news, and I went up to him and I said, can I ask you, we started a conversation somehow. And I said, hey, can I ask you a question? I saw this thing on the news about doctors withholding this thing because they weren't making money and they didn't want to cure cancer. And wow, he just looked at me. He goes, you really think that there's something out there that, I'm rounding on, 20 cancer patients today that, are, terminal or dying. You think I would withhold something that could help them? That, you really think that? I mean, you think there's something out there that us doctors are just saying, oh, no. And, that kind of made an impression on me. And all through my medical career, boy, oh boy, I wish I could have taken that back because nothing could be further from the truth. We sit there and agonize, certainly when people in the hospital, groups of doctors, how can we say that? What can we do to, even desperate measures to try? So we are all, every doctor I've ever met for the most part, certainly in the hospitals, we are all we're not just getting fake research from pharmaceuticals and withholding stuff. Do pharmaceutical industry, are they pushing certain things? Yes, of course, but we're not stupid. We're not idiot. The one thing about doctors, we're so autonomous. We don't have a union. We all think for ourselves. You get 5 doctors in a room and say, what color should we paint this wall?
You get 10 answers.
Yeah. I mean, we're not sheep that are going to, the pharmaceutical industry, they have techniques for getting their word out. But at the end of the day, one of the nice things about going to medicine, which is slightly changing now, is autonomy. You make your own decisions for the most part, as long as so we're not stupid. We're not idiots. We're not whatever. And we're not going to just this is not like some propaganda is going to come from some pharmaceutical company. We're just going to follow it and ignore things that do work. And I just think that that's not where, and I've spent my whole career talking to other doctors, in a hospital, 12 hours a day. It's just not true. None of that is true. We're all fighting for every inch we can get with every patient. And I think it's easy, not to spend 12 hours a day for 10, 20 years and have, but if you had a videotape of all my interactions with referring doctors, it's just not true. The doctors love their patients by and large, and they would fight. They would throw every pharmaceutical company under the bus if it meant helping even one patient. It's just not true because I've lived it. I've been on call, every fourth night for years in a row and gone to the ER, and we're all trying to help the patients. We're not this monolith group that, being swayed by propaganda or the pharmaceutical industry and stuff. Where the rubber meets the road, I think the vast majority of doctors are trying to help patients in ways that it's unbelievable. And the sacrifices they give, like you mentioned earlier, family and time just to do that. So, yes, are there a few bad apples and what have? Of course. But by and large, they're trying, and the hospitals too. They come up with protocols and procedures to save. If a mistake is ever made, a whole new action plan is made, and to prevent it from ever happening again. And there's risk analysis that if something goes wrong in a hospital, how can we prevent it from happening again? And back when doctors used to write notes, there's a big push to make sure doctors' notes were legible so nurses by accident didn't do the wrong. So there's tons of quality improvement and making sure patients get the best care. If you saw it, if you were on the inside track of it, I would guess your perspective would change.
Right. And that's why it's like, I know where I'm at as far as I would say uneducated, really. Like I do the amount of research that I do, but I haven't lived it. And also I have my own personal experiences and this is a funny story. I was out doing summer sales, and I've never, because of where I grew up, or my family when I grew up, I didn't get any vaccines until I was like 18 years old. None. And then I finally got vaccinated because I wanted to go serve a mission for my church and wanted to leave the country. And so their rule were you had to be vaccinated. So I went and got vaccinated. Anyways, I come back. I'm out in Philadelphia doing summer sales door to door. And I got shingles, but I didn't know they were shingles. I just got this rash that started in my butt crack and started working its way up. And it was like fire. It hurt so bad. But I was like, I'll just put lotion on it. That hurt even worse. And imagine like walking around, not tight pants, but a belt, in 100+ degree weather, tons of humidity, sweating like crazy. So all the salt's hitting these open blisters. Anyways, I suffered for it for like a week, and I was like, this just is not going away. Finally, I FaceTime my mom. I'm like, hey, Mom, you're not going to like this, show her my backside. And I'm like, what the heck is this? This is absolute hell. It is painful. And she's like, oh, it looks like shingles. Just go into the doctor. So she set an appointment for me. I went into the doctor, got some antibiotic. Within 24 hours, it was gone. And I was like, oh, my distrust of doctors just literally burned my butt. Like, because I just inherently, I have this mistrust, but really it's like, it was a really simple solution. I could have gone on day one and had it taken care of, but my own lack of willingness and open-mindedness ended up hurting me and causing me more pain because I was the one unwilling to make it trust or unwilling to be even be curious, And so I think that principle applies in all areas of business. What areas of business are you not willing to be open-minded to, or in life or anything, that because of your lack of open-mindedness, it's literally causing you harm every day that you're not willing to expose yourself to it? And it's an interesting question. I mean, you've been through lots of different industries. Now your whole focus now, I shouldn't say your whole focus, I'm sure you have lots of focuses, but one of your businesses is to focus on the user experience. And although your focus on the user experience is in healthcare, understanding humans and user experience, that applies everywhere. Once you start getting into that research, that's like you're now studying human behavior. And so what have you learned about humans and how to help people overcome that faster so that they aren't causing themselves pain? Because ultimately, you may not be in pain, but if you love these people, you want them to be out of pain. But if they're unwilling to hear you or be exposed to you, you can't help them. And so what have you learned about helping somebody through the user experience, either online or in person, so that they're able to actually receive the information to get the help they need?
Yeah, I think if we're confining our conversation to the medical field, I just think if I could be critical of healthcare in a different way, and I kind of hinted at it earlier, is the main thing is whether we're treating or advising or whatever, how difficult is it to get that information? How difficult is it for you to realize that there is a solution out there, or, we have solutions now so you won't get shingles ever again, or dramatically reduce the risk by 95%. So how do we get that information out to you, and how do we make it easy for you to go in and get that? And I think, the other thing that we always talk about is, like, a lot of people dread going to the doctor's office, for example, even just going there or getting an appointment. But the standard clipboard that you're handed. I mean, when you sat in the waiting lobby of the last 10 doctor's appointments that you or anyone had, what they do, they gave you a clipboard with like 20 pages to fill out. And, it's just, you don't get that with other kind of services. Medicine's like, because we're doing such a good thing, we don't care what you have to go through to get it. And I think we should just change that. I think we should say, yes, we have a cure, maybe we have a treatment, but what can we do to make it as easy as possible to get it? Are we going to give you a lot of forms or even insurance companies, prior authorization, and how difficult that is? And, right now, think about it. Telemedicine, COVID was what brought that in. We could have done that 10 years ago. Mail-in pharmacies. Again, there was no incentive to do it, but we had the technology to mail your medications to you. We have the technology, that rash you had on your back, you could have literally done a telemedicine call, even at 12 at night, and said, hey, what is this? I mean, I think we have not done a good job up until now in removing barriers for patients to get the care that they want. If it was super easy to get everything, why do medical records even, just jumping around, why do medical records even need to exist? Meaning, why can't you have all of your medical records right now? I mean, if I said to you, go on your Amazon account and list every single thing you ordered a year ago, January, okay, how long would it take you to get me that information?
Few clicks.
Okay.
Download the report. Yeah.
If I said to you, hey, God forbid you were in the hospital 2 years ago, let me see all those records. I mean, it's not yours. You don't have it. Why can't medical records be exactly the same as looking up something on your Amazon account? Why does it we know if Amazon can do it, hospitals and doctors can do it, right? Right. I mean, so why aren't we doing that? So whether it's the clipboard, the medical records, whether it's the book an appointment, you have to go through 30 prompts. These are things that, get to what you were getting at, is preventing stuff. If it's, why do people order on Amazon? Because it's easy, right? Think about this. The fact that Amazon doesn't make you put your credit card information. I know lots of people who simply often don't buy something online because they have to fill out all these forms. You want to buy, they want my address, information, my credit card. I don't have my wallet with me. But with Amazon, wherever you are in your phone, boom, 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 and the thing is in your door the next day. So when given an alternative to go to a different website, fill out 2 pages of information, or go to Amazon and hit click, where are you going to go to? So I want medicine to be like that. I want medicine to be one-click shopping. And then And then if we remove these barriers, then all the things we talked about earlier, preventative health, wellness, weight loss, smoking cessation, if all of that was at your fingertips and not press 1, press 2, press 3, then press 1, 1, 2, and 3, then, wait 3 weeks, go in, get a big clipboard. That's not the Amazon experience, is it?
No, it's frustrating.
Right. And so I think, we at E7, that's where our technology is focused on, which is to get rid of all that, make everything. We want your medical experience to be as close as to ordering something on Amazon as possible.
That's awesome. Well, I really, really enjoyed this conversation, and I think we could probably have more conversations on this because there's a lot that I didn't get to ask you, but we're going to have to wind down. I do have a few final questions. The first of those is, if somebody did want to get in contact with you, E7 Health, wherever, where would they go? Is there a website you prefer? Is there a number to text into? Like, what's the best way to actually engage with you and your firm?
Yeah. So one is BaktariMD.com, BaktariMD.com. That's our website for most of my stuff, as well as, we have a podcast, also Baktari MD on Apple and on YouTube. So there. And there's contact information on Baktari MD and how they can get a hold of us or me. And of course, they just want more information like this to watch our podcast on Baktari MD.
Awesome. I love it. So Baktari MD, that's spelled Baktari. And obviously,
yes.
if you're listening to this, then you'll be able to see his name there. But just wanted to say that verbally, so if you're just listening and not looking at anything, you'll remember it. So here's a final question. Because again, legacy is really important to me as far as how we're going to be remembered. Mm-hmm. You've made a big push in your life to create a big change, right? You're trying to change the medical industry, which is like not always the easiest thing to change. There's so many moving parts, so many people that have to sign off on it, and you're moving forward anyways. If in 6 generations from now somebody was sitting around a table discussing your life and the impact you had, what would you think people would be saying about you, or what do you hope people would be saying about you at that point?
Yeah, thanks. Well, I think I would compartmentalize it into the professional sphere, which is, trying to really make healthcare more accessible to more people, and thus impact the quality of their lives and quality of their healthcare. And on a personal level, it's just, I'm lucky enough to do a lot of community service, work on some charity organizations, and that's a big part of my life. And I think we're making a difference in people's lives and children's lives and different things we're working on in terms of community service. So I think those would be the 2 bookends that, I'd like to be remembered by.
Awesome. Hey, well, I appreciate your time so much. I do want to have another conversation with you because I didn't get to half the questions I wanted to ask, but
that's okay.
The cool thing about this, guys, is you can go listen to his podcast, and we talked a lot about the healthcare side of things today, but he has an enormous amount of business knowledge and managerial, building teams, creating cultures inside of businesses or families, whatever it is. The principles that you learn are not just one place principles. They're principles about life and humans, and we didn't even get as much into that as we could have, but focus on, or when you're reviewing the rest of his content, be thinking about that. How can he help me from the health side? How can he help me from just life? How can he help me become a better person, or at least a more functional human being across all areas of my life? Because mental health is just as important as physical health. So thank you so much, and we'll catch you guys next time on the Fuel Your Legacy show.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. If what you heard today resonates with you, please like, comment, and share on social media. Tag me, and if you do give me a shout out, I'll give you a shout out on the next episode. Thanks to all of those who've left a review. It helps spread the message of what it takes to build a legacy that lasts. And we'll catch you next time on Fuel Your Legacy.